The air in Ouagadougou buzzed with an energy no one had felt before. Not from protests, not from rallies, not even from celebrations. This was different. The hum of creation, of something new being born. On the outskirts of the city, where dry winds once blew across empty land, a vast complex now shimmered under the Sahelian sun, glass panels, solar fields, steel towers, and an army of young minds in uniforms that read Project Silicon Sahel. Burkina Faso was doing something no one thought possible, building Africa's first sovereign technology zone, free from Western corporate control, powered entirely by local talent and renewable energy. And at the center of it all stood President Ibrahim Traoré, the man who once declared that true freedom isn't won by guns alone, it's won by innovation. The announcement came without the usual fanfare. No global press, no flashy sponsorships, just a televised address in his steady, grounded tone. We have always been consumers of technology built elsewhere. Today that era ends. The Sahel will build its own digital destiny. In a world dominated by Silicon Valley, by European think tanks, by Chinese manufacturing, the statement was revolutionary. But the real shock came when people saw the blueprint. This wasn't a small pilot project. This was a city within a city. A full-fledged innovation hub, research labs, coding academies, AI testing centers, solar-powered data farms, and robotics workshops, all running under Burkina Faso's flag. It was called TR City Phase 2, but soon the world began calling it something else, Silicon Sahel. What started as a dream was now a bold declaration that technology could be made in Africa, by Africans, for Africans. The zone's charter was clear. No foreign ownership, no external surveillance systems, no dependency on imported software. Every line of code, every machine, every panel had to be developed or co-designed by Burkinabe engineers. International analysts scoffed. How can a landlocked country, under sanctions with limited infrastructure, possibly build a tech hub? The same question the world asked when the first electric buses rolled out of Ouagadougou. And just like then, Traoré didn't answer with words. He answered with results. Within 6 months, the first cohort of engineers graduated from the National Tech Sovereignty Institute, trained by African professors who had returned from the diaspora. Drawn home by the vision, they were not just coders. They were nation builders. The first major breakthrough came from a small startup called Burkitech, run by 3 20-somethings from Bobo Dioulasso. They unveiled a solar AI processor, optimized for low-energy environments, something even major Western firms struggled to achieve. Their device, Soma, was designed to bring AI computing to rural Africa, where electricity is scarce but sunlight is abundant. It went viral across African tech circles. The president himself visited the lab. Cameras caught him shaking the hand of one of the founders and saying, "You've done what they said was impossible. You've brought intelligence to the sun." And it wasn't just symbolism. Government contracts soon followed, integrating Soma chips into smart irrigation systems across the country. The same dusty farmlands that once relied on guesswork were now run by local AI predicting rainfall, soil health, and yield cycles. For the first time, technology wasn't a tool of dependency. It was liberation. Behind the scenes, global powers weren't happy. Western tech giants that once dominated Africa's software and communication networks began to feel uneasy. One leaked report from a European think tank warned that the Burkina Faso digital model could spread, threatening long-term market access and influence. But Traoré didn't flinch. He doubled down. He ordered the creation of the Burkina Data Firewall, a national data security network, ensuring that no information left the country without authorization. It was Africa's first homegrown digital sovereignty law, designed to keep Burkinabe data in Burkinabe hands. Critics called it isolationist. Supporters called it independence. At the heart of Silicon Sahel was a powerful philosophy. Digital freedom is national freedom. Local programmers began building alternatives to Western software. FasoNet, a social platform with no ads, no data mining. Sahel Pay, a blockchain-powered mobile payment system using local currency. Koom, a drone logistics startup delivering medicine and books to rural schools. Each of these projects was homegrown, funded by micro-investment cooperatives instead of foreign grants. The excitement was infectious. For the first time, Africa wasn't just catching up. It was innovating differently with purpose. International journalists started arriving, skeptical but curious. They expected a dusty construction site, maybe a few shiny prototypes. What they found stunned them. 24-hour coding labs buzzing with energy, 3D printers running on solar grids, engineers debugging self-driving prototypes built from recycled vehicle parts. A BBC correspondent muttered off-camera, "It's like watching a revolution, but one made of code instead of bullets." But it wasn't all smooth. With progress came pressure. Cyber attacks began, anonymous, coordinated, targeting Burkina Faso's new servers. Western media framed them as testing vulnerabilities. Local experts called them sabotage. The government stayed silent but quietly fortified its cyber defense unit, trained within Silicon Sahel itself. President Traoré's message was clear. They can attack our systems, but not our spirit. Then came the turning point, the announcement of the Pan-African Cloud. Silicon Sahel was no longer just a national project. It was becoming continental. Under a new AES, Alliance des États du Sahel framework, Mali, Niger and Chad were invited to connect their universities and institutions to Burkina Faso's data network. The idea? To host Africa's own digital cloud, free from Western or Asian data centers. It was radical. It was dangerous. And it was genius. Suddenly, this wasn't about one country anymore. It was about a region declaring digital independence. The African Union, once cautious, began to take notice. Ministers from Ghana, Senegal, and Kenya quietly sent delegations to study the model. Tech students across the continent began applying to train in Silicon Sahel. The youth called it the new independence movement, online. For every drone that took flight, for every young coder who compiled a clean line of code, for every server that booted up on solar power, a quiet message was being sent across the world. Africa is no longer waiting for permission. The sound of keyboards had replaced the sound of chains, and yet, this was only the beginning. The world hadn't yet seen what was coming next. The moment when Silicon Sahel would step out of Burkina Faso and challenge the global order directly. Because what started as a local dream was about to become a continental shockwave. At first the world laughed. They called it idealism, a political stunt, a Sahelian fantasy. But laughter has a strange way of turning to silence when results start to speak. Within months, Silicon Sahel wasn't just functional, it was profitable. The young coders who once worked under flickering lights in Ouagadougou were now signing contracts with African universities, hospitals and even governments. Software once imported from Europe was now being developed in Burkina Faso, cleaner, faster, and far cheaper. The message was unmistakable. Africa could now code its own destiny. By mid-year, a quiet storm was brewing in boardrooms across the world. In Paris, analysts called emergency meetings to discuss digital destabilization in West Africa. In Washington, a classified memo warned that the Sahel bloc is becoming digitally self-reliant. External leverage is diminishing. In Beijing, state media started calling Traoré the new face of African modernization. But inside Burkina Faso, none of that mattered. The people were too busy building. At dawn, rows of solar panels reflected the first light of day as engineers arrived at the complex. Drones zipped overhead, carrying circuit boards between labs. Electric trams, powered by local batteries, brought in students from New Tech, institutes in Koudougou and Bobo-Dioulasso. The sound wasn't of chaos, it was of purpose. President Traoré often walked through the complex unannounced, dressed simply, his military beret still on. He'd stop beside a workstation, ask a programmer about their project and listen quietly. He wasn't there for photo ops. He was there to understand the pulse of the future he was building. In one memorable clip that went viral across Africa, a young woman coder nervously explained her AI translation project designed to make African languages fully digital, starting with Moor, Fulfulde and Bambara. When she finished, Traoré said softly, "When we digitize our languages, we immortalize our identity." That line exploded online. It became the unofficial motto of the Silicon Sahel movement, but the next announcement would shock the world even more. Burkina Faso revealed the Faso OS, a fully indigenous operating system built from open-source African code bases. It wasn't just software, it was a declaration of technological independence. No tracking, no foreign backdoors, fully encrypted, multilingual. It ran on locally produced solar servers and powered thousands of government systems, replacing imported software that once cost millions annually. The reaction was instant and fierce. Western tech conglomerates began to panic. Trade restrictions were quietly discussed. Rumors spread of cyber attacks targeting the Faso OS core. But for every digital strike, the Sahelian coders struck back with resilience and upgrades. The harder they were hit, the stronger they became. And then came the day everything changed. Traoré announced a new policy live on television. From this day forward, no national institution of Burkina Faso shall operate on foreign cloud servers. Our data is our sovereignty. The crowd erupted. That wasn't just a law. It was a line drawn in digital sand. International media scrambled to respond. Some called it digital nationalism. Others called it the dawn of Africa's tech awakening. But in Ouagadougou, they simply called it freedom. Soon, other nations took notice. Mali joined the network. Niger followed, then Guinea and Chad. Together, they announced the creation of the AES Digital Alliance, a Sahel-based partnership to build a shared data infrastructure, open AI labs, and Pan-African payment systems. The West was stunned. The IMF didn't see it coming. The World Bank didn't understand it, and Silicon Valley couldn't control it. The revolution wasn't televised. It was live-streamed. From African servers, suddenly the phrase "made in Burkina Faso" started appearing on digital devices, mobile apps, even satellite components. Investors from across the continent poured in, not the exploitative ones, but the visionaries. Ghanaians, Tanzanians, and South Africans came to learn. African billionaires funded local ventures instead of parking their wealth overseas. It was more than a project. It was a shift in consciousness. For decades, Africa's wealth was dug from its soil, gold, oil, cobalt. But now a new resource was emerging, data. And this time, Burkina Faso was determined not to let it slip away. Inside the data fortress, a sprawling solar-powered facility outside Ouagadougou, petabytes of African knowledge were now being processed and stored locally. Agricultural data, healthcare research, meteorological systems, educational archives, all secured under the Burkina Data Act. The symbol was powerful, the continent's collective intelligence, protected by its own children. One evening, as the sun sank behind the Sahel, Traoré gave a short address that would later be studied in leadership programs worldwide. He said, "We were told the world runs on algorithms. They never said who writes them. Today we write ours, and in them we write our future." That clip spread like wildfire. Hashtags like Mao Silicon Sahel, Now Africa Codes, and Digital Liberation trended across social media. African youth, from Lagos to Nairobi, felt seen, inspired, unstoppable. Universities began adding Sahelian model courses. Tech hubs in other countries replicated the blueprint. Even Caribbean and South American leaders asked for partnerships. The shift was global, but behind the optimism, the pressure was mounting. Cyber espionage attempts intensified. Economic sanctions loomed. A coordinated media campaign painted Traoré as authoritarian, anti-Western, dangerous for business. He didn't respond with anger. He responded with results. Burkina Faso unveiled Project Dambe, a satellite network designed to provide free educational internet across the Sahel, powered by local technology and coded from the ground up. Students in remote villages who once studied by candlelight were now logging into Burkina Faso's open digital classrooms. No ads, no fees, no data theft, just access, pure sovereign access. For the first time, the world realized this wasn't just a tech project. It was a cultural revolution. And perhaps the most remarkable moment came when a small Burkinabe robotics team won an international AI challenge in Geneva, beating teams from the US, China, and Europe. When asked how they managed it with fewer resources, their team leader smiled and said, "We built with purpose, not profit." That single sentence encapsulated the spirit of the new Africa Ibrahim Traoré was building, proud, capable, self-reliant, and visionary. Today, Silicon Sahel stands as more than a physical place. It's a movement, a mindset, a message to the world that Africa is not the future. Africa is the now. And while the rest of the world debates ownership of the next digital frontier, Burkina Faso has already claimed its peace, not through colonization, but through creation. The revolution began quietly with keyboards and courage. And in the heart of the Sahel, under the same sun that once witnessed struggle, the light of innovation now burns bright. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't just lead a nation, he awakened a generation. Because when Africa believes in itself, the world has no choice but to pay attention.